I was living on a ranch with my grandparents. After my parents kicked me out and I couldn't afford rent on my own, my grandparents let me stay with them for just a small cost. I was grateful, sure, but the adjustment wasn't easy. My room was on the first floor, and the moment you stepped in, there was no mistaking it. It reeked of old age. A thick, musty scent clung to everything, like the air hadn't been properly circulated in years. It was the kind of smell that sat heavy in your lungs. The walls were cluttered with my grandma's religious artifacts, crosses, rosaries, statues, but the one that got under my skin most was the enormous painting of Jesus. He hung there on the wall, right across from the bed, eyes following me no matter where I shifted. Even in the dim light, I could feel his gaze. Cold, unblinking, constant. For the first week, nothing out of the ordinary happened. The place was quiet, too quiet sometimes. But it wasn't until the second week that things started to feel wrong. It was a long day at the corner store in town where I worked. By the time I clocked out and made my way back, night had already fallen. The countryside was pitch black, no streetlights out here, just the rustling of leaves and the endless stretch of crops swaying gently in the wind. As I reached the front porch and slid my key into the lock, something stopped me cold. Footsteps, not on the gravel path or the porch, but out in the crops. A slow, deliberate crunching, faint but unmistakable. My first thought was that someone might be trying to steal from my grandfather's fields. It wasn't unheard of. I leaned forward a bit, squinting into the darkness, straining to see past the porch light's glow. The breeze whispered through the stalks, but I didn't move yet. I needed to be quiet. I carefully stepped away from the door, making sure not to step on any dried leaves or gravel that might give me away. Then I saw it. Something or someone was moving out there in the crops, but not walking, crawling. They were on all fours, creeping low to the ground like an animal. Their movements were too controlled, too deliberate to be someone just lost. They were sneaking. A chill slid down my spine. My instinct screamed at me to say something, to confront them. But common sense kicked in. Whoever they were, I had no idea what they might do if cornered. So I backed away and went inside, locking the door quickly behind me. I woke my grandfather. He was half asleep when I shook him, but once he understood what I'd seen, he jolted up and grabbed his rifle without hesitation. No shoes, no coat, just fury and a shotgun. He stormed outside into the cold, his voice roaring into the night like thunder. If I ever catch you on my farm again, I won't hesitate to blow your goddamn brains out. He was shaking the gun in the air, shouting into the darkness. The words echoed off the still fields, cutting through the silence like a blade. The crops swayed gently, but there was no reply. Whoever had been out there, if they were still listening, they got the message. And for the moment, That was enough to send them running. Or at least, I hoped it was. But the next night, things took a darker turn. I was asleep, or at least trying to be, when something pulled me from that half-conscious haze. A sound, faint at first, tickled the edge of my awareness. I lay still, listening. It took a few seconds to register. Laughter. Not the kind you'd hear in a living room, not joyful or warm. This was sharp, crooked, like someone trying to imitate a laugh without knowing what real joy felt like. It came from just outside my bedroom window. I sat up, heart already pounding before I even turned my head. There was someone standing there, silhouetted in the moonlight, right outside the glass. He was staring in, motionless. His face was hard to see, just a pale smudge behind the screen, but I could feel his eyes locked on me. And he wasn't surprised I saw him. No, he noticed when I sat up. Then, slowly, without a word, he stepped back and disappeared into the shadows. I told my grandpa the next morning. He wasn't just mad, he was furious. The kind of fury only someone raised on hard work, bad knees, and no patience for nonsense can conjure. He stomped over to his closet, muttering under his breath, and grabbed his rifle again. This time, I stayed close behind him. He stormed toward the front door, loaded and determined. But the second he opened it, chaos. Something lunged out of the darkness and grabbed his leg. The movement was too fast, too precise. It yanked hard, and he stumbled forward, landing hard on the wooden stoop. I didn't think, I just reacted. I threw myself forward, tackling the figure who was still in a crouched position. They hit the ground with a dull thud, caught completely off guard. I pinned them with my weight, adrenaline pushing my strength past normal limits. My grandpa scrambled back to his feet, grabbing his rifle and aiming it right between the guy's shoulders. I grabbed the phone and called the sheriff, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to keep it together. But then, just as the line connected, I heard a sudden, awful crack, followed by a scream that cut through my bones. It was Grandpa. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor, the sheriff's voice still crackling faintly on the line. My throat tightened, my eyes blurred with panic. I rushed to the stoop, expecting the worst. There he was, on the ground again, but this time his hand was clutched tightly over his nose, blood dripping down his fingers. Another person, someone we hadn't seen, had come out of nowhere, slammed him to the ground, and punched him straight in the face. Then vanished into the night before either of us could react. They didn't take anything. They didn't even try to. Who punches an old man like that, an elderly man, without reason, without mercy? I didn't chase them. I didn't grab the gun, and that still eats at me. By the time the sheriff finally arrived, there was nothing left to see. No attacker, no trail, just blood on my grandfather's shirt and a sick feeling in both our stomachs. The sheriff took our statement, nodded like it was nothing new, then left. And my grandpa, still sore, still seething, decided enough was enough. That night, he pulled down the small camera system we had installed and repositioned it. The new target? The crops. Because something was watching us from out there. And now, we were watching back.
Last month, I got home late one night after spending the evening with my sister, brother-in-law, and a few of their friends. It was close to midnight, quiet, still, the kind of silence that clings to the walls of sleeping neighborhoods. As I walked up to our front stoop, I noticed a note taped to the door. It was from my mom. "Take the garbage cans out to the front, please." I sighed and grabbed the cans. Most of the house was dark by then, everyone already asleep, so I made a point to stay quiet, careful not to scrape the bins against the side of the house. But as I reached the side yard, just past the corner near the trash cans, something made me stop. Voices, low, muffled, coming from the backyard. I froze, holding my breath. Carefully, I crept toward the fence and peeked over the top. My heart dropped instantly. There were two people standing in our backyard, right there, by our patio table. Just standing. Still, no sound but their quiet murmuring. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the way they stood, too still, too calm, made my stomach twist. I bolted, ran back inside, through the front door, slamming it shut behind me, and sprinting to wake my mom. If my dad still lived with us, I would have gotten him, but it was just the two of us now.
We had barely made it out of her bedroom door when we heard them. The two people from the backyard were coming up the stairs. The creaking steps were slow, deliberate, growing louder with each passing second. Without thinking, I shoved my mom toward the window. There was a tiny ledge right below, barely enough to stand on, let alone land safely. But I made her go. I practically forced her out through the window, whisper screaming, "Go, go," as the doorknob behind us began to turn. Just as I was hopping out myself, the intruders entered the room. I only got the briefest glimpse of them, two dark figures just inside the doorway, before I dropped down beside my mom. We hit the grass hard. No time to think, no time to feel the pain. We ran, barefoot, breathless, terrified. We bolted across the lawn and straight to our neighbor's house, banging on the door like our lives depended on it, because they might have. 2 weeks passed, 2 long, tense weeks. We were trying, really trying to move on, to convince ourselves it was over, a one-off, a fluke. But deep down, we never stopped looking over our shoulders. And then, it happened again. It was 3 a.m. when the phone started ringing. It didn't just ring once or twice, it kept ringing.
No voicemail, no pause, just ring after ring after ring, as if someone wanted us to hear it, wanted us to be awake.
Me and my mom both sat up in bed, staring at the phone like it was about to explode. After the 10th or 11th ring, she stood up slowly, staring at it like it had a pulse. We didn't answer. We just let it ring, and ring, and ring. It went on for what felt like forever. 10 straight minutes of that shrill sound drilling through the silence. Eventually, she snapped, stormed into the hallway, grabbed the modem, and yanked the phone cord out of the back like it was a venomous snake. Silence returned, but sleep didn't. That night, we left the phone off. And I knew, deep down, I knew it had something to do with the break-in. 2 incidents that strange, that close together, don't happen by accident. There's a link. There has to be. And just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, the next morning, my mom's phone buzzed with a message. Just one line. Why didn't you pick up? That was only a week ago. We've been on edge ever since. Every creak in the house, every shadow outside the window, it all feels too loud, too close. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they want. But we know this isn't over. And we're scared as hell for when it happens next.
It was a regular school night when a 14-year-old girl lay fast asleep in her bedroom. Everything was quiet, just the soft hum of the house at rest. But suddenly she sat up in bed, a thought crashing through her sleepy mind. Homework. She had completely forgotten. An entire assignment was due the next morning, and she hadn't even started. Frustrated, she flicked on her bedroom light, the warm glow chasing away the shadows. She reached for her pencil, spread the papers across her desk, and got to work. The clock on the wall ticked steadily in the background. 1:15 a.m. Her pencil scraped rhythmically across the paper, each stroke echoing faintly in the stillness of the house. But after a few minutes, she paused, brow furrowing. She heard something. Faint, subtle, almost easy to miss. At first, it sounded like light scratching, maybe even a mouse. But as she sat still and listened, the noise became clearer, more deliberate. It wasn't coming from the hallway, or the ceiling, or the floor. It was coming from inside the walls. She leaned closer, heart beginning to thump louder than before. The sound grew sharper, like something heavy was being pushed and dragged inside the narrow space behind the drywall. There was a storage space right next to her bed. A big square opening in the wall that connected to the crawl space behind the rooms. It was sealed with a removable panel, a door of sorts. She turned toward it. The noise was coming from there. Her breath caught in her throat. And then she screamed. She screamed for her mom, her voice shrill and panicked, cutting through the late-night silence. The moment the cry escaped her lips, the noise inside the walls exploded into chaos. Whatever was in there, it started running,
fast, clumsy, slamming and thudding against the inner framework of the house like a trapped animal. And then, in one horrifying moment, the panel in the wall burst open. A figure emerged. Not a shadow, not a dream. A man. Pale, tall, overweight, white, and real. The girl's scream was cut short as the man lunged forward and clamped his large, sweaty hand over her mouth. Across the house, through 3 closed doors, her parents heard her screams. Her mother gasped. Her father was already moving, tearing down the hallway, feet slamming against the floorboards. He burst into the room within seconds. And there he saw it, his daughter pinned beneath a stranger.
That same heavy man crouched over her, still trying to silence her, his grip firm and twisted with intent. The father didn't hesitate. He struck hard, one solid punch straight to the man's gut. The man reeled. Another hit, then another, and the stranger collapsed backward in a heap. The fight ended almost as quickly as it had begun. The man was subdued and restrained by the time police arrived. But as officers searched him, they made a chilling discovery. 2 pairs of the girl's underwear stuffed in the pockets of his jeans. He was arrested on the spot, and though the worst had been prevented, the girl, her parents, and their home would never feel the same again, because monsters don't always hide under beds. Sometimes they're already inside the walls.
Me and my wife had planned a quiet evening together at Cedar Beach. It wasn't anything fancy, just some time away, the 2 of us, with the ocean as our backdrop. The kind of simple night that should have been relaxing. Unfortunately, we didn't realize until we got there that the beach officially closed at 9:30 p.m. And Cedar Beach is remote, miles from anything resembling a town, store, or even a gas station. Once that gate locked, we were pretty much cut off from the rest of the world. So we decided to make the best of it. The night was calm, the tide was low, the wind gentle. So we walked. Side by side through the damp, cool sand, we wandered aimlessly, letting the sound of waves fill the silence. It was a little after 9:30 when we started, and by the time we turned back, it was close to 10. For the first half of our walk, we didn't see a single soul. Not a whisper of movement, not a flicker of another flashlight. Just the moon hanging over the water and the rhythmic crash of waves rolling in. But when we turned around to head back, something felt different. At first, it was subtle. The kind of thing you notice only when your mind's quiet enough to listen. There were more footprints in the sand. At first glance, you'd think they were ours, except they weren't. Ours had already begun to fade, softened by the wind and the tide's slow creep up the shoreline. But these were fresh. 2 distinct sets of footprints, dry-edged, crisp.
They were beside ours at first, overlapping slightly, following the same direction we had walked. But then they veered. They turned off, away from the wet sand, up toward the dry dunes that lined the beach's edge. My wife and I froze for a moment, sharing a look. No one had passed us, no distant conversation, no approaching lights. We would have seen someone. We should have seen someone. We had walked nearly 2 full miles up the shoreline. There were no side entrances, no nearby streets, just us and the waves. So where did these other footprints come from? A chill rolled down my spine, not from the wind, but from that unmistakable gut feeling that something was wrong.
I pulled out my phone and opened the flashlight app, aiming the beam toward the dunes where the mystery prince vanished. The beam cut through the dark like a blade, bouncing off tufts of dune grass and jagged bits of driftwood. Nothing. I scanned slowly, methodically, sweeping the light left and right. My voice sounded strange as I called out into the empty beach air. Hello? No answer. Just the sea, just the wind, just the footprints leading somewhere we couldn't see. I turned to my wife and told her to stay put, just for a minute. There was only one place nearby where someone or something could be hiding. The cluster of large garbage bins farther up the beach near the edge of the dunes. It was the only spot with enough cover. I moved slowly toward them, my flashlight cutting through the dark. The sand shifted under my feet with each step, crunching softly. As I got closer, I swept the light behind the bins. Nothing. But then something caught my eye. A space behind the bins, a narrow, almost hidden tunnel that seemed to lead down into a slope, maybe to a back parking lot or a maintenance path. I hadn't noticed it before. It was like it had been swallowed by the shadows. I took another cautious step forward and angled the flashlight downward. The beam hit the mouth of the tunnel, and then I froze. There were 2 figures inside. I didn't call out, didn't blink. I just stared. Huddled there in the middle of that dark tunnel were things. I don't even know if I should call them people. They were hunched low, crouched unnaturally, their limbs curled in tight, completely naked. Their skin, what I could see of it, was this sickly, patchy tone, almost like a medium-toned Caucasian complexion, but drier, rougher, wrong. It was wrinkled and flaky, like peeling bark or burned leather. They didn't move, just sat there, almost like they were hiding or waiting. I immediately shut off the flashlight, didn't breathe, didn't think. I turned and stomped through the sand as fast as I could without screaming, adrenaline kicking in like fire through my veins. I grabbed my wife by the arm. "We're going, now!" She didn't ask questions. She could tell by my face that something was very, very wrong. We ran hard, kicking up sand behind us, feet slipping in the soft wetness. The beach was eerily silent, except for the sound of our frantic breaths and pounding steps.
It felt like it took forever, but we made it to the car in 5 minutes, completely out of breath and drenched in sweat. As soon as the doors slammed shut, I locked them, double-checked, then finally exhaled. That's when I told her what I saw. She just stared at me, not scared, not angry, just like she didn't believe a word of it. And to be honest, I can't blame her. I know how it sounds. Hell, you probably think I'm making it up too. But I'm not. I reported what I saw to the local authorities the next day. No one really followed up. Just a generic report, a shrug, a note scribbled down. But something about that night won't leave me alone. Ever since then, I've been coming back to Cedar Beach once a week, late at night, same time, same path, searching. I don't even know what I'd do if I did see them again, but I can't shake it. They're out there, and I'm not done looking.
I work as a night janitor at the local high school. It's quiet work, routine. Most nights, it's just me. 95% of the time, I'm the only one scheduled for the night shift. There's never really a need for more than one person at that hour. I usually start downstairs, cleaning the first floor classrooms, and then work my way up to the second floor. The cafeteria, gym, auditorium, and nurse's office, those are handled by the morning and afternoon crews. So at night, the school is mine, and mine alone. To break the silence, I keep a few old radios scattered around the hallways, blaring music loud enough to drown out the eerie stillness. It helps, keeps the place from feeling so dead. That night was no different. I was mopping the floor in one of the upstairs social studies classrooms. The second floor of the school is shaped like a giant U instead of a complete loop. So if you want to get from one wing to the other, there's only one way around. No shortcuts, no back routes. I had my head down, focused on my work, when something caught my attention. From all the way across the school, clear on the opposite wing, I saw it. A classroom light switched on. It didn't flicker. It didn't dim in and out like a bad bulb. It simply turned on. And I knew, absolutely knew, that it hadn't been left on.
I always shut off the lights in every room I'm not actively working in. That's routine. That's the rule. This wasn't a forgotten switch. This was someone turning the lights on. A chill immediately ran down my spine. I froze where I stood, mop still in hand, heart starting to pound as I stared across the long hallway. Then I saw them. A figure. Someone walked up to the window of the lit classroom. They didn't fumble around. They didn't look confused or lost.
They walked up to the window on purpose and stopped, then just stared right at me. Across the distance, across the hallways and classroom windows, our eyes met. They didn't move, didn't tilt their head, didn't blink, just stood there, staring. I can't describe exactly why, but it was one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. There was nothing theatrical about it, no sudden scream or banging, just that cold, motionless watching, like I was the one who didn't belong. I stood there, frozen. My hands were trembling on the mop handle, and my thoughts were racing. Do I confront them? Do I run? Do I call the police? Because whatever that was, it shouldn't have been there. And yet, there it was, staring back at me, as if I was the intruder. I stepped closer to the classroom window, cautiously, my footsteps slow and deliberate across the polished floor. I needed to see him clearly. It was a man, definitely not a student. He looked like he was in his 30s, maybe early 40s. Black hair, unkempt. His face was shadowed, but I could make out heavy facial hair, a thick beard or stubble that made him look even rougher. His eyes were impossible to read from this distance, but his body language was off. Then, without breaking eye contact, he raised one hand and waved. A slow, deliberate wave, like he already knew me, like he was saying hello to someone he'd been watching for a while. My breath caught in my throat. Without thinking, I reached for the cord and snapped the blinds shut, cutting off the sight of him like slamming a door. My chest heaved, and I pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. My thoughts were spinning. What the hell is he doing here? How did he even get in? I waited, counted to 10, then slowly lifted the blinds again, just an inch. The classroom across the school was dark. The light was off. The man was gone. My heart spiked. He's coming, right now. He's coming across the hallway toward this room. I didn't wait to confirm it. The panic took over. Every rational thought in my head shut down, and I turned on my heel and ran. I sprinted down the hallway, barely registering the slap of my shoes on the tile. The stairwell door banged open as I threw it wide, bolting down the stairs 2 at a time. I didn't care about my mop, the radios, the lights I'd left on. None of it mattered. I barreled through the back door of the school and burst into the night, lungs burning, heart pounding, the cold air slicing through my clothes. All I could think was, get out, get out, get out. The next day, the security footage was reviewed, and that's when we saw it. Sometime during the night, the man had emerged from the basement of the school, just walked up the stairs like he belonged there. No sign of breaking in, no forced entry, just came out from underneath us. He wandered through the hallways for a while, aimless, slow, almost like he was exploring, watching. But when we zoomed in, When I got a better look at his face, I felt a sick twist in my gut. There was something deeply wrong about him. Something vacant in his expression, like he was moving through the building on autopilot, but with a purpose he didn't even need to understand. His features were gaunt, almost sunken, like he hadn't slept in days, or eaten, or blinked. But that wasn't the worst part. The camera eventually caught him walking back down into the basement. And then, nothing. No footage of him coming back out. We searched, the staff, security, even the police. No one found him down there. No sign of him at all. Which makes me wonder, are there hidden rooms down there? Passages? A way out we don't know about? Or maybe worse, maybe he never left. Since that night, working this job hasn't felt the same. Every echo in the hall, every creak in the pipes, every time a classroom door clicks behind me when it shouldn't, I wonder if he's still in that building, watching, waiting, somewhere below. Back when I was 17, I worked as a house cleaner to save up money for college. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid decently, and I wasn't picky. The person I worked for the longest was a guy named Jeffrey. We didn't talk much. In fact, I only really spoke with him once when we first met, and maybe a handful of times after that. Usually just in passing if he came home early from work. That was it. No small talk, no personal stories. I couldn't tell you if he was normal or not. He wasn't rude, but he wasn't friendly either. Just distant, cold maybe. The kind of person you'd forget about if they walked past you on the street. But there was one thing about him that always stood out. He had a rule, a very strict one. Never go into the basement. It wasn't a suggestion. He made that crystal clear on day one. In fact, there was a massive sign, handwritten in red marker, taped right to the door. Do not enter. Underlined twice. That door was always locked. And even though curiosity gnawed at me more and more each week, I kept my distance. I tried to respect it. I really did. But you can only ignore something for so long. One afternoon, while I was dusting furniture in Jeffrey's bedroom, something got the better of me. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just got snoopy. You know how it is. Boredom, temptation, a little voice in the back of your mind saying, "What's the harm?" So I started going through his drawers. The big ones were filled with clothing, nothing strange, shirts, pants, socks, all folded neatly. But the smaller drawers were more personal. Cameras, batteries, old photo albums, random knickknacks. Still, nothing that set off any alarms. I opened the center drawer, same deal. But when I pulled open the bottom drawer, something caught my eye. Tucked neatly into the back corner was a small wooden box. It looked old, worn around the edges like it had been opened and closed 100 times, but not recently. The lid had a tiny brass keyhole. This wasn't the kind of box you pop open with a paperclip. It needed a key, and I had seen one. Hanging on a key ring in the kitchen, a small, oddly shaped key that I had always assumed was for some old cabinet or maybe an outdoor shed. But now, something told me otherwise. I walked downstairs. My heart was already racing, my hands slightly sweaty. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or anticipation. Probably both. I grabbed the key and hurried back up to the bedroom. It slid into the lock with a perfect click. I hesitated, just for a moment. Then I turned it. The mechanism gave a soft twist, and the lid popped open with a creak. Inside was something I wasn't ready to see. Something disturbing. Inside the box was a stack of black and white photographs, a thick pile, all of them worn around the edges, as if they'd been handled again and again. The first few didn't seem strange. They were just photos of the house. Empty rooms, hallways, corners of the living room. Harmless at first glance. But then, my stomach turned. The next photo had me in it. So did the one after that. And the one after that. I flipped through them faster, my hands beginning to tremble. Every single picture from that point on had me in it. In every single room of Jeffrey's house. Cleaning, dusting, standing, kneeling, reaching. Even in the bathroom. I felt sick. These weren't taken casually. They were deliberate. Some from odd angles, low to the ground or high in the corners, like someone had been photographing me from hidden vantage points. And then I found the final photo. It wasn't black and white. It was in color. That made it stand out even more. It had been taken from outside, through one of the kitchen windows. I was standing near the sink in the photo, doing the dishes, completely unaware. But the focus, the clarity, it felt like whoever took it was standing just beyond the glass, staring at me through the window, camera in hand. I swallowed hard, forcing my breath to stay steady. I put the pictures back in the box, all but a few. I kept some as potential evidence in case anything worse ever happened. My mind was racing now, 100 dark thoughts colliding at once. I locked the box, slid it back into the drawer, exactly where I found it, and left the rest of the room untouched. My plan was simple: get out of that house and never come back. And I almost did. But as I passed the basement door, the one with the "Do Not Enter" sign, the curiosity that had been clawing at me for weeks surged back up. I wasn't coming back, so I figured I'd look, just once, so it wouldn't haunt me forever. I reached for the doorknob. It turned. I stepped inside and flipped on the lights. The smell hit me immediately. a sharp, rotting odor, like dead animals, like something long decomposed. I gagged. The staircase creaked under my feet as I descended, and when I reached the basement floor, my eyes swept the room. Posters lined the walls, dozens of them. Most of the pictures were disturbing, vivid, unsettling. Some were faded and torn. Some looked like they'd been cut out from magazines. And then I saw another set. Photos of boys and girls, very young, far too young. I stepped back instinctively, my stomach turning. I couldn't bring myself to examine them any closer. I didn't want to. There were 2 doors down there, both shut. Maybe closets, maybe rooms. I didn't try either one. But I noticed something. The worst of the odor seemed to be coming from that part of the basement. Then I heard it. A soft buzzing noise, like something electric. It triggered whenever I moved, like some kind of device reacting to motion. That's when I saw it. Tucked in the far corner of the ceiling, partly obscured by exposed pipes, was a small camera. A security camera pointed directly at me. As soon as I noticed it, it froze. No more movement, like it got stuck mid-scan. That was it. That was the sign to leave. I didn't wait. I ran up the stairs, slammed the basement door, and got out of that house as fast as I could. I drove straight home. Didn't pick up the phone when it rang that night. It was Jeffrey. Just one call. No message. And thankfully, I'd never given him my address. I haven't seen or heard from him since, and I pray it stays that way. I had just gotten off my midnight shift at Stop and Shop. It was nearly 1 a.m., and the parking lot was mostly empty. Just me and the only other guy on shift that night. We were both exhausted, dragging our feet toward our cars under the dull orange glow of the overhead lights. That's when it happened. A black pickup truck rolled slowly into the lot and pulled up right beside us, blocking our path. It felt off immediately. The engine idled loud and uneven, like it hadn't been serviced in years. Inside were 2 people, a man and a woman. They looked like something straight out of a bad backwoods horror film. Dirty, unkempt, wrong. The guy was behind the wheel. He had a patchy beard and thick mustache, a worn-out baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. A cigarette dangled from his mouth, the ash dangerously long. His expression was unreadable, but not in a good way. It was blank in the kind of way that makes your skin crawl. The woman in the passenger seat looked worse. Her hair was stringy, matted, almost greasy-looking even in the low light. But it wasn't just her hair. Her whole face looked dirty, like she hadn't washed in days. Her eyes were wide,
too wide.
They both stared at us in silence for a moment before the man finally spoke. "Either of you got some spare change? We need gas," he said. His voice was low, almost casual, but there was something behind it, something sharp. My coworker fumbled through his pockets, trying to be polite, and dropped a couple quarters into the guy's outstretched hand. I didn't want to make a scene, so I offered $1 just to end the conversation. The man looked down at the coins and bill in his palm, then raised his eyes slowly, locking onto both of us. "I'm gonna need more than that," he said flatly. There was no thank you, no friendliness, just pressure. We both apologized nervously. I could feel my coworker tensing up beside me. "That's all we've got," I said quietly. "Bullshit," the man snapped. The word cracked the silence like a whip. I looked at the woman. She hadn't said a word, but the way she was grinning at us, this twisted, devilish smile, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. She was enjoying this. Something about the way she looked at me made it feel like this wasn't about gas money. Not really. I didn't wait. I took a step back, then casually slipped around the side of their truck, keeping my eyes forward as I speed-walked to my car. My coworker caught on and did the same. Behind us, I heard the truck's engine rev. I turned my key in the ignition, and the car sputtered to life. I didn't waste a second. I slammed it into drive and peeled out of the parking lot. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw their truck spinning around to follow. But by then, I was already gone. Headlights off, foot on the gas, heart pounding in my chest. At first, it looked like they were following me. The black pickup stayed in my rearview mirror for a good couple of blocks, headlights locked on me like a predator stalking prey. I made a few turns, took an unexpected exit. After a while, they were gone. Or so I thought. Relieved but still on edge, I pulled into a gas station to regroup and catch my breath. My hands were still trembling on the steering wheel. I grabbed my phone and shot a quick text to my coworker. "You good?" A minute later, he replied, "Yeah, I'm fine. Made it home. You?" I started to type back, but then headlights. Bright, high-beamed, and pulling into the station. It was the pickup truck. That same filthy black beast, creeping into the lot like it had been sniffing me out the whole time. Panic surged through me like ice water in my veins. I dropped the phone, scrambled back into my seat, and slammed the car door shut. The truck rolled slowly across the lot and pulled in front of me, trying to block me in. Then I saw her. The woman in the passenger seat leaned forward, that same sick smile twisted across her face. Her hand came up from her lap, holding something. A gun. She was rolling down the window. My survival instinct kicked in.
I yanked the gear into reverse, floored the gas, and shot backwards out of the parking lot just as a deafening crack shattered the night. The back window of my car exploded, glass raining down across the seats as a bullet punched through it. I didn't look back. I just drove. Hard, fast, heart in my throat, blood roaring in my ears. I took corners too tight, sped through red lights, anything to lose them. By some miracle, I did. Eventually, the roads behind me were empty, silent again. When I made it home, I didn't even turn the car off right away. I just sat there in the driveway, trying to breathe. Once I calmed down enough, I stepped out to inspect the car. 2 more bullet marks, one in the rear bumper, another near the back wheel. I stood there staring, realizing just how close I had come to dying that night. For what? A few quarters? $1? It chills me to the bone thinking how quickly everything escalated, how close I was to being a name on the news, another late-night tragedy no one would understand. There are some truly messed up people in this world, and I was inches away from becoming one of their victims. Me and Andrew, my half-sister's cousin, were both 18 years old when we decided to go exploring in the old abandoned asylum just outside of town. It was already well past dark. The streets were dead quiet, no cars in sight, and the chill in the air told me it was probably sometime after midnight. Andrew was the one driving. We didn't tell anyone where we were going. We both brought our video cameras, cheap ones, the kind that still used tape. YouTube was only 2 or 3 years old back then, and urban exploration was starting to become a trend. Creepy old buildings, haunted places, grainy footage, it was blowing up. We thought we'd try our luck and maybe get something cool. The asylum had been fenced off for years, but someone had already cut a hole near the base of the chain link. We crawled under, brushing against weeds and loose, rusted wire. Our flashlights clicked on as soon as we were clear. The building loomed ahead like a rotting skeleton. We got in through one of the broken windows on the lower level. A few wooden planks had once been nailed over it to keep people out, but they were now lying scattered on the floor, splintered and kicked aside. I stepped inside first. The moment we entered, everything changed. It was cold. Not just temperature cold, but silent, dead, hollow. Like the air had been holding its breath for decades. Andrew followed close behind, flashlight in one hand, camera in the other. His camera had a night vision feature. We kept it rolling the whole time, just in case. Everywhere we looked, it was the same story. Broken glass, torn out insulation, graffiti covering walls like mold. There were jagged cracks in the wooden floors, and here and there,
wide holes where the boards had caved in, revealing nothing but pitch-black voids beneath. Neither of us dared shine our lights into those holes. We weren't looking to test our luck. We joked around a little, tried to keep it light. We laughed, whispered stupid things to the camera. But underneath it all, I was creeped out as hell. And I could tell Andrew was too. He didn't say it, but the way he kept glancing behind him, the way his jokes started trailing off, it was obvious. The silence of the place was just too loud. The building was massive. Hallways branched in every direction, rooms with doors barely hanging on their hinges, shattered tiles crunching underfoot. Eventually, we ended up in a small room tucked off one of the side corridors. It was different from the others. There, in the center of the room, was a dental chair. Rusted, discolored, the faux leather split and peeling. Around it were pieces of old dental equipment, yellowed plastic tubes, sharp metal tools dulled by age, all coated in dust. It wasn't bloody, it wasn't dramatic, but it was wrong. The chair sat under a flickering ceiling fixture, long dead, but its presence alone made the space feel occupied, like something still waited there. Andrew went quiet. His flashlight beam hovered over the tools. My skin prickled. It felt like we weren't alone in that room, like something had been waiting for someone to come back. Of all the rooms we explored on the second floor, the bathroom was the one that left the deepest chill in my spine. We stepped in cautiously. The air was heavier in there, thick with the stench of mildew, damp tile, and something faintly sour, like rusted pipes or old water left to rot. Then we heard it, a dripping sound, constant, methodical, coming from inside one of the stalls. Drip, drip, drip. We aimed our flashlights toward the sound. The stall door was closed, locked from the inside. Andrew jiggled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Whatever was behind it, if anything, it didn't want to be disturbed. We dropped to our knees to peek under, but the gap beneath the stall was too narrow to see much. Just darkness. No smell, no movement, just that steady, rhythmic dripping. Drip, drip, drip. The longer we stood there, the more wrong it felt. We didn't wait to investigate further. We turned and left in a hurry, flashlights bouncing off the cracked tile as we moved. Our nerves were already frayed by the time we came across the next door. It looked unassuming, just another rusted door in a long hallway. But when we opened it, we found a narrow stairwell leading either upstairs or down. We looked at each other. We were there to make a creepy video, after all. So, like the dumb teenage guys we were, we picked the scarier option. We went down. The temperature dropped noticeably as we descended. The steps groaned under our weight, the concrete walls closing in tighter with every level. When we reached the bottom, we found ourselves in a new series of underground hallways. And these were different. The walls were older here, peeling paint, exposed pipes, water stains bleeding through every corner. Our flashlight beams seemed weaker somehow, swallowed up by the darkness. We turned a corner and found an old bulletin board mounted to the wall. Faded photos were pinned to it. Grainy black and white images of staff, patients, and group activities. Most of the people in them looked uneasy. There were also yellowed newspaper clippings, some of which had headlines about patient escapes and mysterious disappearances. We were leaning in to read one of the clippings when we heard it. A sharp, metallic thud echoed from farther down the hallway. We both jerked upright, spinning our lights toward the sound. And in that split second, we saw it. A forehead, just the top of a pale, bald head, moving past the end of the hallway and slipping silently into one of the rooms. For a moment, we both froze, completely paralyzed. Then Andrew screamed, and I didn't wait. I turned and ran with him, back the way we came, our footsteps pounding against the floor in panic. I tried to convince myself it was just a homeless person, maybe someone squatting there. But that theory crumbled when I heard footsteps behind us, coming up fast, heavy, deliberate. We were flying up the stairs, but the footsteps were there, on the flight below us, closing the distance. At that point, I was screaming too, and what terrified me the most wasn't what I saw. It was the feeling that at any second a hand might wrap around my ankle, pull me back down into the dark. But somehow we made it. We reached the main floor, raced down the hallway we'd come from. Our window, our exit, was right there. We dove through it, scrambling into the cold night air, landing hard on the ground outside. Then, as we got up and ran for Andrew's car, we heard something that made the blood drain from my face. From inside the building, behind that broken window, we heard a door slam open. The stairway door from the hallway we had just escaped. We didn't look back. We ran, threw ourselves into the car, slammed the doors, locked them. Andrew fired up the engine and tore out of the lot, tires screaming. We never said a word. We didn't speak again until we were halfway home. And even then, neither of us had an explanation. We never went back. We were a young couple, just starting out. The house we'd moved into felt like a fresh beginning, cozy, quiet, and tucked into a peaceful neighborhood. It had 3 levels, an upstairs, a main floor, and a sunken den. No basement, no creepy cellar, just a simple home. Our bedroom was on the first floor. The first few nights were uneventful, but then the sounds started. Strange noises at night, faint at first, like soft bumps and dragging sounds. They seemed to come from beneath us, not from the walls, not from outside, from below the floor. The first time I heard it, I got up and checked under the bed, expecting to find maybe something had rolled underneath. Nothing. But the sound kept happening. Quiet thuds, shifting, low, almost muffled moaning. And it didn't make sense. The house didn't have a basement. We both started paying closer attention. In the mornings, things would be off. Doors we knew we had closed the night before would be open. Not just cracked, but wide open. Especially my wife's closet door, which always seemed to swing open during the night. We'd shut it before bed, check it twice, but by morning, it was open again. We blamed the windows. Maybe a draft. So one night, we shut every single window in the house, latched them tight. We even stuffed towels under the door frames. Still, the next morning, all the doors were open. That's when we realized this wasn't something we could ignore anymore. We decided we'd stay up that night, both of us. We turned off the lights, sat in bed, silent, just listening. That's when we heard it. The noises from below were louder than ever, deep, grinding sounds, like heavy furniture being pushed across the floor. And then, moaning. Not mechanical, not the creak of old pipes. Human sounding, uneven, distressed. I got up and headed down to the den, flashlight in hand, trying to keep my breathing calm. The air felt heavier there, the walls cold to the touch. I moved slowly, scanning the room. Then I pressed my ear to the wall. At first, nothing, but then I heard it, right behind the wall. Closer now. The sound was coming from inside, from within the structure, not the hallway, not a crawl space. The wall I was leaning against, and just a little lower, beneath the den, a space that wasn't supposed to exist. I went back to my wife, my heart still racing from what I'd just heard behind the wall. I told her we needed to stay up as long as we could and just watch, wait, see what would happen. So we did. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of wood or soft hiss of the wind outside. We sat on the bed in the dark, barely speaking, both of us staring at her closet door as if it might open by itself at any moment. By the time 2 a.m. rolled around, she started to drift off. I tried to keep my eyes open, but at some point, I must have dozed off too. I woke to her shaking me, her face pale, eyes wide with silent tears streaking down her cheeks. She didn't say a word, just pointed. Her closet was open again, But this time, it wasn't just the door. There was a hidden panel inside the closet, a section of the wall propped open. Behind it, we could see a narrow opening that led down into the floor. I jumped out of bed and grabbed my flashlight, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stepped into the closet and aimed the beam into the hole. A ladder, old, metal, leading deep down into the darkness. It wasn't just a crawl space or some forgotten vent. It was a passage, a vertical shaft. To where? I didn't know. I turned to my wife and told her to lock the bedroom door and stay put. Then I grabbed the machete I kept for emergencies, mostly for clearing brush in the backyard, but tonight it was something else entirely. And I climbed down. The rungs groaned under my weight. The air grew cooler, damper, the deeper I went. At the bottom, I found a light switch and flipped it on. The space lit up with a sickly yellow glow. It wasn't a cave or unfinished basement. It was a room, a small one. There was a rickety table and chair in the center. A narrow cot sat in the corner with an old blanket folded neatly on top. Scattered across the floor were toys, broken plastic figures, stuffed animals, and old children's books yellowed with age. The whole room felt like a place where someone had been living. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Then, a scream from upstairs. My wife. The sound shot through me like lightning. I spun and climbed the ladder as fast as I could, machete awkward in one hand, my boots slipping on the metal rungs. The closer I got to the top, the louder it became. The sound of wood splintering, a shoulder slamming against the door, and my wife screaming behind it.
By the time I reached the bedroom, part of the door had been kicked in. A fist-sized hole splintered through the wood, and through it a face appeared. A man, filthy, wild-eyed. His skin was grimy, his beard patchy and twisted, but it was his eyes that made my blood run cold, red, wide, completely unhinged. We locked eyes for a split second. Then he saw the machete in my hand. Without a word, he pulled back and ran. I heard the front door slam open, and then nothing. Just silence. We didn't chase him. We couldn't. My wife collapsed in tears, and I held her there, machete still gripped tight in one hand. Later, when the police came, they searched the hidden room. They said it was probably some kind of old bomb shelter, built long ago and sealed off from the house. But I don't know. I don't know who that man was. I don't know how he got down there. And worst of all, I don't know how long he'd been living there, beneath us, listening, moving at night, waiting for the moment we let our guard down.
I was 27 years old when I finally moved out to live with my girlfriend. We found a small apartment together. Not exactly luxury living, but it was enough for us. We weren't the wealthiest couple by any stretch, but we were happy to have a place to call our own. It was a modest building on a quiet street, old, a little worn down, but functional. Our first night there, though, we realized something was off. It started with the noise, yelling, thumping, over and over, echoing through the walls like the apartment next door was hosting a demolition derby at 2 a.m. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It went on for hours, agitated, erratic, like whoever lived there never slept. My girlfriend was the first to speak up about it. She wanted me to go over and say something, but I told her if it happened again the next night, I'd handle it. The next day, we didn't hear a peep. It was dead quiet while we unpacked boxes and set up furniture. We even joked that maybe the neighbor had moved out or was just passing through. But when night fell, the silence broke. And this time, it was worse. The yelling started around midnight, guttural, strained. At first, we couldn't even tell if it was in anger or pain. Then came the banging, relentless, like someone throwing their whole body into the walls. Our walls. There were even times we felt the impact. Something was slamming so hard it vibrated our bedroom. That was it. I'd had enough. I told my girlfriend I was going over there. I stepped out into the hallway, barefoot and half asleep, and walked up to the neighbor's door. My knuckles hesitated for a moment, then knocked firmly. The noise stopped abruptly. Then the door creaked open. Standing there was a middle-aged woman. Her skin was pale, too pale. White hair, washed out blue eyes. Her face was weathered and dry, her features hard. She looked like she hadn't seen sunlight in years. She was an albino, and her voice matched her appearance, raspy, like her throat had been scoured by 40 years of cigarettes. I tried to keep things polite. "Hey, sorry to bother you, but could you please keep it down a bit? We're just trying to get some sleep." She stared at me for a long, uncomfortable beat. Then she leaned forward, narrowing her eyes. "Back off. Mind your own business." And she slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a second, stunned, before walking back to our apartment. I didn't even make it to the couch before the noise started up again. Only now it was louder, like she was punishing us for speaking up. The yelling turned to shrieking. The thudding became violent slams, like furniture was being thrown. We just sat there in the dark, staring at the wall, feeling every vibration, every echo, like it was inside our own apartment. That was the moment I realized. Something about our neighbor wasn't just rude, it was wrong. The next morning, my wife insisted we needed to report her. She wasn't wrong. Whatever was going on in that apartment wasn't just inconsiderate anymore. It was something else entirely. So I went down to the front desk and brought up the issue.
the couple in the apartment next to ours. I mentioned the constant yelling, the banging, and how it seemed like there were two people in there, arguing violently throughout the night. The doorman gave me a strange look. He told me there was only one tenant registered in that unit, a woman named Kathy. Her husband had died 5 years ago, he said. She'd lived alone ever since. According to the lease, she was the only one allowed in that apartment. No roommates, no visitors. If she wasn't alone, she was breaking building policy.
The doorman agreed to check it out himself. He went up to her apartment while I waited downstairs, trying not to overthink what I'd just heard. When he returned, he looked unsettled. "She let me in," he said. "I checked every room. There's no one else in there. She's completely alone." That shouldn't have made me feel better. But he said he'd spoken to her, asked her to keep the noise down. I thanked him and went back to our apartment, still trying to shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. That night, everything was silent. No yelling, no banging. It was the first truly quiet night we'd had since moving in. For a moment, I actually believed it was over. Until I woke up. I didn't know what stirred me at first, just that something felt off. The air in the room felt colder, thicker, like it was holding its breath. Then I saw it. A figure standing at the foot of our bed, still, pale, watching. "Anna," I whispered, my voice trembling. My wife stirred beside me. I turned to look, and she was right there, lying next to me. I snapped my eyes back to the foot of the bed. A raspy voice, unmistakable, cut through the silence. "You shouldn't have reported me." I screamed, fumbling blindly for the lamp on the nightstand. My wife screamed too, louder, panicked, her voice pure terror. The second I flipped the switch and light flooded the room, she was gone. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, feet barely in my slippers, and tore out into the hallway, still in my robe. I didn't even think. I just needed to know where she went, how she disappeared so fast. Her apartment door was wide open. I stepped inside. The place was quiet, still, empty. No sign of her. No sound, no movement. She had vanished. And from that moment on, nothing was heard of Kathy for an entire week. No noise, no complaints. No one saw her leave. It was like she had melted into the walls. Until one night. We were lying in bed, still shaken but trying to move on, when it happened. 4 loud knocks echoed through our wall. Not thuds, not furniture banging, knocks. Deliberate, measured. They sounded like they came from just a few feet away. Clear, heavy, meant to be heard. That was enough. We moved out the next day. No argument, no second thoughts. We packed everything in a hurry and never looked back. I still don't know what we encountered in that apartment, but whatever it wasn't just a neighbor. It was something else entirely. Something that didn't want to be seen, and definitely didn't want to be reported.